Nichelson is coming up. This is the first time he's spoken to one of our Tesla-related gatherings. He's a historian. He's done graduate work in history at Harvard, has a master's degree there, which is very impressive. He's been writing on Tesla for about 30 years, and he has a good collection of academic papers on this subject. I've never met him before, don't know him very well at all, but I'm real glad to see him here. And he also currently is working internet security, and that's pretty hard work, I understand, these days. So let's please welcome Oliver Nichelson.
Thank you. It's bright. There is another little change in the listing of this topic. One place in the schedule it shows that this is the dynamo electric machine of Tesla. Actually, it started out as Tesla's Fuelless device. This is a piece of history that I think will have a big effect on our future. For me, this started in January of 1976. Took the train up from Washington, D.C. to New York. There was an IEEE convention going on up there. And the IEEE is a society for professional electrical engineers. Well, the IEEE is not a hotbed of new ideas. So when I got to the convention, started listening to some of the papers, I kind of wish I hadn't made that long train trip. There was one good speaker. He was the director of the Tesla Museum from Belgrade. Had some very interesting things to say about Tesla. But on the whole, I was kind of disappointed in the whole thing. But I remember having read something about there being a collection of Tesla papers at the Columbia University Library. And it was nearby, so I went over there. And I went to the rare book room, and I said, where's the Tesla collection? I said, well, sit down, we'll bring it out to you. Well, there's 6 magazine boxes, and I kind of despaired because I had planned only like 2 hours to go through papers. So I sat down, started going through, and most of that was pretty boring too. It was letters to lawyers, letters to engineers, ordering things, social notes about accepting weekends here or summers there. And I got to about the 4th box, and I was thinking, well, I'm going to give myself another 15 minutes, and I'll get back to the conference and see what was going on. In the 4th box, I opened an envelope, and out came a letter and a press clipping. And this press clipping, you can see it was from the New York Herald, 1902. And it says, uses electricity without a medium. And it's a report from London about a engineer, a senior Clemente Figueres, engineer of woods and forests in the Canary Islands, who had come up with a new machine. He said it could derive electricity from the atmosphere without using any fuel. And it goes on saying that this will have a great social impact on the economy and technology. And yes, that's true. Try as I might, I couldn't find out any more information about Figueres and his Fuelless generator. Someone was able to track down one of his 4 patents that were filed with the Spanish patent office in Madrid, but no one's been able to translate the technical Spanish. The interesting thing about the Figueres article was Tesla in his, next slide please. Tesla writes his oops. I think the one before that.
Back up.
Well, there, okay, we want 2. Okay, there's number 2. That's kind of a poor copy of a letter that Tesla wrote his friend Robert Underwood Johnson, who is the editor of the Century magazine. And in that he says, "Dear Luca," and he's referring to the Fuelless invention. He says, "The invention seems to have been suggested by my article, which has given great trouble to you and infinitely more to me. Look up page 200 of the Century article, particularly where I refer to novel facts. The report," meaning the report in the newspaper, is, you can go on to the number 3, "is not likely to be true," so he doesn't believe in that particular invention, "but it is singular that I have also found a solution which I have been following up since a long time, and which promises very well. I was at the point of revealing my method in the article," this was the Century article that he wrote in 1900, "but you pressed me to, well, not explain in detail, that I did not have enough energy left to do it. Now I'm glad. The conditions on Canary Island are ideal for the success of such methods as I contemplate to employ for getting a steady supply of small amounts of electricity. Sorry I am unable to call." So we have two curious things here. There's an article saying, okay, I have an electric generator that produces energy without consuming any fuel, and Tesla says, well, hey, I've already done that. So I decided that the time at the library and the trip to New York was worth it at that point. Next slide, please. Figuring out what invention he was talking about became the next task. And the most obvious one would seem to be his device for collecting radiant energy, which is a fairly simple device. The plate at the top collects particles hitting it, goes down to a capacitor that's in the ground, and when enough energy builds up in it, he's able to use it in the device D. He says the sun, as well as other sources of radiant energy, throw off minute particles of matter, positively electrified, which, impinging upon the plate, communicate continuously an electric charge to that plate. The opposite terminal of the condenser being connected to ground may be considered a vast reservoir of negative energy. A feeble current flows continuously into the condenser, that part in the middle of the C and T, as the condenser. And inasmuch as the particles are charged to a very high potential, this charging of the condenser may continue, as I have actually observed almost indefinitely, even to the point of rupturing the dielectric. So this at first seems like a very good candidate for his device for collecting energy without burning fuel, coal or oil. But then in 1900, he wrote this Century magazine article, which he describes as the most important article that he has ever done. And he describes a self-acting machine that would draw power from the ambient medium. Technical terms are a little hard to translate nowadays. And the article is entitled "The Problem of Increasing Human Energy Through the Use of the Sun." And that was published in June of 1900. Now, next slide, please. Oh, gosh, even that one's hard to read. Well, the main heading on the article is "A Departure from Known Methods, Possibility of a Self-Acting Engine or Machine, Inanimate, yet capable of living, capable, like a living being, of deriving energy from the medium, the ideal way of obtaining motive power." Well, this sounds like he's talking about his version of a fuelless energy device. Tesla said he first started thinking about the idea when he read a statement by Lord Kelvin, who said it was impossible to build a machine that could both take energy out of the medium and use that energy to do work. As a thought experiment, Tesla envisioned a very long bundle of metal rods extending from the Earth to outer space. The Earth is warmer than outer space, so heat would be conducted up the bars along with an electric current. And all you'd have to do is find a very long extension cord to plug your radio in, and you would have free energy. But the point of his thought experiment is, okay, the formulation of the rules of energy and of heat aren't as clear-cut as they've been stated in, well, second law of thermodynamics. Tesla goes on in the article to describe how he worked on the development of such an energy device. He said he first started thinking about it in Paris in 1883, but that he was pretty busy developing his alternating current generator, transformer, motor system, which became the system we're still using today. At the close of the article, he states that several machines were constructed by him 2 years ago, and 2 years before that would be 1889. And all the evidence points to the turbine-shaped unipolar dynamo as being Tesla's first design for a machine that continued to produce electricity after being connected from an outside source. Next one, please. Okay, this is the dynamo electric machine, 1889. And this is kind of interesting in that he first develops the really elegant alternating current generator and motor, which is beautifully complex. Then for some reason, he's going back and dealing with, these large flat blades, and on the outside of the blades is a belt. And the question that came to my mind, why is he kind of going backwards in technology? But what he was trying to do, apparently, was look at ways of improving an electrical generating device that had better efficiency. In this particular one, what he does, he has a magnet that covers these two large flat surfaces. And by covering the surfaces, this is compared to like the Faraday thing where he had a disc and he had a small magnet and got current off this. He was able to get the current, he was able to get the whole surface to generate current, and by taking off on the outside, he reduced the back current in his system. So to my mind, what he was looking at was, okay, how can I reduce the inefficiencies in electrical generating systems? Let's see. Well, let's see. I got to find out how I number these pages here. He moved on to a different type of machine. Go on to the next one. Okay, this is from an article he wrote about a unipolar generator. And again, I was puzzled, why is he going back to these cruder, less elegant forms of electrical generators? Well, what he does in this case is he has a magnet that covers this whole surface. Then he has these radial lines that go off and takes the current off the outside. So what he achieves by this is that, again, the whole surface is generating, and there's, it appears to overcome the problem of most electrical or most physical systems where when you create an action, you get an opposite reaction that slows stuff down. As you know, if you have two wires and you're sending current through wire one, as the current goes through here, it sets up a magnetic field that sets up an opposing current, so you're losing efficiency. And here, he claims that once you start up a system like this, oh, by the way, and this is a similar device, but what he has is a metal strip around the outside to take the current off. He says it will continue working even after it's unplugged. He doesn't say how long, minutes, whatever. But again, to my mind, he seems to be dealing with the problem of how do you get the reaction to your original action to enhance the system instead of degrade the system. Later on, let's see, in the okay, to continue with the thought of how such a fuelless device works, he later on in the Century article says, okay, think of this. You have a tube sitting at the bottom of a lake. And if you wanted energy, which is the lake water, to come in, what you could do is you could pump all the water out of the tube and water would come back in, so you wouldn't really gain anything. He says, but let's suppose as the water came back into the tube, it was converted to something else, like hydrogen and oxygen. That way, once you pump the water out of the tube, as the water from the lake, which is the body of energy, started to come back in, it wouldn't fill up the tube because it would be converted into two different things gases that would go off. So that was his model of saying, okay, once we set up a device that's kind of a sink in this sea of energy, if we can have a conversion process, we can keep pulling in energy into our device. As he puts it, corresponding to the ideal case, all the water flowing into the tank could be decomposed into oxygen and hydrogen, and the result would be that the water would continually flow in, and yet the tank would remain entirely empty, the gas formed escaping. We would thus produce, by expending initially a certain amount of work, create a sink for the water to flow in, a condition enabling us to get any amount of energy without further effort. And once again, remember that he considered this the most important article he wrote. Tesla recognized that no energy conversion system would be perfect. Some water would always get in the tank, but there will be less to pump out than flows in, or in other words, less energy will be needed to maintain the initial condition that is developed by the incoming water. And this is to say that some energy will be gained from the medium. Just as a historical note, he said he found that this pumping could be done with a piston, not connected to anything else, for you to vibrate at an enormous rate, and claimed that he showed off such a mechanical device at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. But also in 1893, Tesla applied for a patent on an electrical coil that is the most likely candidate for a non-mechanical successor to his energy extractor. And next slide, please. This is called the Coil for Electromagnets, patented in 1893. This is another curious design because unlike an ordinary coil made by turning wire in a tube form, this one uses two wires laid next to each other on a form, with the end of the first one connected to the beginning of the second one. Okay, end of first connected to the second. In the patent, which is well worth reading, Tesla explains that his double coil will store many times energy of a conventional coil. And next slide, please. The first measurements of two coils. We're kind of improvising on the slide. We don't have a true slide projector, so I apologize for the quality of the slides. Okay. Okay. In the this is a graph of these were two coils, both the same size. As I remember, they were 3 inches in diameter. Yes. Okay. 3 inches in diameter. And they were the pancake coils. They were wound on a piece of plastic. And we put them on a device and found the resonant point for both coils. This is the standard coil at its resonant point. And this is the double wound coil at its resonant point. And this is a reading of voltage gain. Well, I was pretty surprised. The difference in the voltage gain for the Tesla device is about 9 times the standard coil. There is a difference. Because of the greater capacitance of the double wound coil, its resonant point is about half that of the single wound coil. So and these are frequency markers, and I can't read them right now, but say let's say this one was at 4 megahertz. This one would have been at like 2 megahertz. Later on, we're able to make another measurement. Can I have the next slide, please? And this was, instead of pancake coils, double winding on regular tube forms. And I forgot the diameter. I guess they were about 3 inches wide, and this is number 22 wire, and same amount of turns. Once again, we have the, you can either call it, this is the Tesla design, and this is frequency going up, and this is the single wound design. So as you can see, the primary resonant frequency for the standard design was higher than that one. But once again, we see this 9 times better voltage response. Or put in another way, it's doing this particular task, it's 900% better. Okay. The patent, however, the patent for the coil for electromagnets, and that's kind of a really deceptive name for a device that looks like it has some extraordinary properties. Gives no hint of what might have been its more unusual capability. In the Century article, Tesla compares extracting energy from the environment to the work of another scientist who at the time was learning to condense atmospheric gases into liquids. And particularly cited the work of Dr. Carl Lynn, who had discovered what Tesla described as a self-cooling method for liquefying air. As Tesla said, this was the only experimental proof which I was still wanting that energy was obtainable from the medium in the manner contemplated by me. The next slide, please. Okay, this is Carl Lynn's self-cooling device, and I wish this is a little clearer, but essentially the magic of this device boils down to, okay, you want to take atmospheric gases and you want to turn them into a liquid. What he does in these coils is he has a tube with inside a tube. So the gases come in, go through this cooling process, then they go out in the other tube, and the cool gases aid in the cooling process of what's in the first tube. So the analogy is, okay, something is happening in this double winding or this double tube configuration that Tesla saw as similar to what was happening in his double coil system. And there's a lot of speculation on what's going on. For example, it may be, and this is the speculative part where we depart from the historical facts, is that in the double wound coil, it may be working on the same principle as what happened in the unipolar device, where he tries to get the reaction to the original action to be additive to the system. So that the two wires next to each other in a double wound coil, instead of working against each other, work in conjunction with each other. I encourage anyone that has the equipment to continue work on these coils. I've done 3-inch pancake, 6-inch pancake, 3-inch on tube form, I think 5-inch on tube form, and they all have, when compared to the standard coil, the same characteristics. The double wound coil voltage response, voltage gain is 9 times better than the single wound. So it's consistent. The actual shape of the coil doesn't seem to have that much effect on whether it's flat or whether it's on a coil form. Doesn't seem to have any difference on its electrical performance. There may have been special reasons why Tesla was looking at the pancake. One of them is that because he was dealing with such high voltages, he wanted the highest part of the voltage to be physically farther away from the low part of the voltage so that he didn't have arcing over. So he uses this spiral form a lot in his designs. And tying it back to his magazine article, what may be happening there is that the double wound coil is functioning something like the hypothetical situation with the tube in the lake. Now, the tube in the lake was, okay, we pump water out, and how do we keep it empty? We have a process where the water is turning to hydrogen and oxygen, so the tube stays empty, so the water, or the energy, keeps falling in. It may be that in the double wound coil, what you have is a situation where you're inputting current, but your device is ending up as just potential. So you just have high positive and high negative potential. Why this is important is because in the physics that Tesla grew up with, 19th century physics, as many of you know, they held that there was an ether, and this was the subtle stuff that all material stuff condensed out of, and electricity condensed out of. And in the earliest days, when you had, when Ben Franklin was doing his experiments and you wanted to store charge, you'd have like a glass container with metal on the outside and the inside. And these devices were believed to condense the ether and create electricity, which is held in the bottle. And up to very recently, these devices were called condensers. So in that the double wound coil is acting something like an active condenser, this may be the clue to the type of thing he was thinking about when he's talking about a fuelless device being able to pull in energy. The interesting thing, I came across a website not too long ago It was a company, I think, that made specialized capacitors. And in the article leading into the description of the products, the guy says, you know, our capacitors used to be called condensers, but what did they condense? So this points out how it's difficult understanding what Tesla is getting at, because nowadays they don't understand the science that Tesla grew up with about the ether, how the ether condensed into electricity. But an area well worth looking into. And with Tesla's prominent position in the world of science of the time, it's curious why Tesla's invention, going back to the magazine article where he said, well, you know, I've already invented this. You know, this is a kind of important thing. Why didn't it catch on? Why don't we have it today? Why don't we have this new electrical device, this new energy generator? Economics, not science, appears to have been the main factor. The adoption of alternating current was opposed by powerful financiers of the period. Michael Pupin, another leading electrical researcher at the turn of the century, noted in his autobiography, captains of industry were afraid that they would have to scrap some of their direct current apparatus in the plants for manufacturing it if the alternating current system received any support. Ignorance and false notions prevailed in the early 90s because the captains of industry paid small attention to the highly trained scientists. So they were saying, okay, you know, there was an electrical battle between DC and AC, and a lot of money was put into Edison's DC system. Tesla comes along, he has an AC system, it works better, everyone sees it works better, so all the money put into DC was lost. So, and this was about, you know, 1880s. So if he came along with a new device in 1890s, and they'd have to scrap their AC investment, it wouldn't be received real well. Tesla saw that profits could be made from self-acting generator, but somewhere along the line, he had it pointed out to him that the negative impact the device would have. At the end of the section in the Century magazine article, where he described his new generator, he wrote, I worked for a long time fully convinced that the practical realization of the method of obtaining energy from the sun would be of incalculable industrial value. But the continued study of the subject revealed that while it would be commercially profitable if my expectations were well-founded, it would not be so to an extraordinary degree. My reading of that is that he recognized that there would be economic resistance to it. Years later, in 1933, he was more pointed in his remarks about the introduction of his Fuelless generator. In the Philadelphia Public Ledger of November 2nd, in an interview, Tesla was quoted in an article headlined, Tesla Harnesses Cosmic Energy. He was asked whether the sudden introduction of his new device would upset the present economic system. Dr. Tesla replied, it is badly upset already. He added, now, as never before, was a time for the development of new resources. So this potential invention's been sitting there for well over 100 years. And the need for development of new resources is even greater than Tesla's time. Perhaps these overlooked inventions will make his vision of increasing energy through the use of the sun's energy become a reality. That's what I have. If you have any questions.
Well, presently we have still about 20 minutes if you'd like to entertain question and answers. Otherwise, let's be back here. Let's see. Actually, let's take a quick look at this. We may dismiss for lunch if there's no questions. Are there questions and answers first, and then maybe we'll dismiss at 11:30?
Yeah.
Okay, please wait till we give you the microphone before you ask your question, okay?
If you were to continue, what interesting things would you tell us?
If I were to continue, I guess the biggest question on my mind is if this, I'm speculating right now, if he's using a capacitive system and it's one that's oscillating, how does he actually drive a device? I'm thinking it's either very low current or no current. And the other thing is that this seems to be similar to what he was doing with his wireless system. And he says, okay, I don't have any energy loss, but there has to be no work done in the device itself. Okay, no work in the technical sense, which means essentially no current. There's no current translating across a surface area. So I'm thinking, okay, you have an oscillating device, you don't have any current. That's one whole problem to deal with. The next whole problem is how do you use this to run a device? And I think that's worth looking into, and that's the thing I would do next.
The coil for electromagnets that you showed us,
Yeah.
is that what also is known as a bifilar winding?
Yeah.
It is. So Tesla has the original patent on that.
Well, it's a modern, modified bifilar winding in that the, I mean, the coils do exist with two windings on a form. But what he does is he takes the end of the first winding, connects it to the beginning of the second winding. So he has a patent on that, not the actual two windings themselves. Anyone? Or lunch? Sure.
For we electrical amateurs, could you explain how you test the characteristics of those coils?
Sure. The first one that just had two plots, it just had a signal generator where you could hone in on a particular frequency. You look on the scope, see where the biggest rise is, plot that. We had a pen plotter at the time, and then looked for the biggest rise on the second coil and plotted that over it. On the second graph, the curvy one, let's see, what device do we have? Let me look that up for you. It looked over a range of frequencies, and oh, that's okay. I guess I don't have that with me. It was an HP device that generated a signal over a range of frequencies, and we simply, took the output of that. Okay, that's the first one that was done on the device that, did a single frequency at a time. Yeah. Flip it over. The writing's backwards, the plots pretty much stays the same. So the second device, we could scan, I forget, from 1 to 30 megahertz. I can look that up for you if you want more specifics on it.
Yeah.
I understand that Tesla is planning on taking electricity from the ionosphere and transmitting it to homes. Now, and I understand that that could probably be charged the same way satellite broadcasts are charged, you know, on satellite television. But do you have any idea on how Nikola Tesla could extract the ionosphere electricity and capture it and transmit it?
No, I don't, because I believe that's an incorrect interpretation of his work. See, he talked about taking electricity from the ambient medium. And for him, that was a specific 19th century physical term, meaning like the ether. And nowadays, when people don't really understand the ether, they say, well, there's taking it from the ionosphere, which I believe is an incorrect understanding of what he was saying. So was your question about the mechanism or how you charge for it?
How he derives it from the air.
Well, yeah, I don't believe he was talking about that. There are a number of variations on the internet on how people understand the double wound coil might have worked in connection with deriving energy, and some of them are different.
Next question here.
Yes, sir. For the last couple of years, I've been working on his resonance patent. And what I've come up with is a system that works. It produces power, but I don't have it where I want it yet. And it's very large, so I can't bring it down here. But that patent does work, where it showed him drawing out of the atmosphere, but it's also used in conjunction with the Earth too. So what you've done is you're sitting on a major dynamo, but you have to learn how to use the potential. Once you have the potential, you can use it.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of interpretations on how the double wound worked, and I have one take on it. Yeah, I want to point out, there's a big difference. There's some things that are solid facts, like the historical stuff, the letter he wrote, the clipping, and there are measurements that are facts, and everything else beyond that, including things I say about how these things work, it's theory. So, like this fellow, he's doing work on it to find out how it does. Yes, sir.
Couldn't this tube within a tube relate to Paul Pontain's GEET engine theory?
I'm sorry, I don't know that one.
Well, he runs a tube within a tube to bring fuel into his engine. Mm-hmm. And this tube within a tube theory seems like that pertains to that somewhat.
Oh, it could. I'm sorry, I don't know the GEET engine.
Hi, I was wondering if this is related at all to the hydrogen fuel cell technology that they're using in Los Angeles and Quebec for regional transportation?
I'm afraid I don't know that fuel cell structure, but the little I do know about fuel cells, I don't believe it is related.
Okay. I don't really know how it works because I'm not a scientist. They have something called an electrolyzer that separates water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then and I think the hydrogen powers the vehicle, and then the waste is water, and it's 100% non-polluting. But I was just wondering, I don't know.
Yeah, the hydrogen oxygen thing I talked about was just a thought experiment that Tesla had in trying to explain how you create a sink for energy so that you keep pulling in energy without consume. He described it as a device that would not consume any fuel. Yes.
Yeah, when you refer to ambient energy in 19th century terms, is that what we'd think of now as 0 point or quantum flux energy? Just like a translation?
I don't know. It's a very good question. the development of ether theory, when they first there was the old medieval idea that you had all this energy and it turned into solid stuff. Fine stuff turned into solid stuff. Then when electrical technology started getting developed, they came up with an idea that, well, they discovered an electron. They said, well, where do electrons come from? And one of the Thompsons says, well, you have this vortex model, and this little tornado turns into this solid object called the electron. But it would be really intellectually fun to be able to translate what they meant by ether, and different people at different times meant different things, into our concepts, our more modern concepts of, you know, what that would be. I don't know. I think the, you know, like 0-point energy is something farther down in the chain of energy, harder to reach. It doesn't seem like electricity that we have nowadays comes directly from 0-point energy, but then I'm not an expert on it. So short answer to the question, no, I don't know, but it'd be fun to figure out. Yeah.
I had a question, but I also had a comment. If you look at Tom Bearden's work, he does a lot of theorizing about back EMF, which is one of the things you discussed, as exactly how 0-point energy is obtained from an electrical circuit. So, and then the other thing I was really asking about was, are you pursuing this Lynn gas? I'm just fascinated that the morphology of a gas coil and an electrical coil are so similar. Are you doing something with that?
No, I haven't had a chance to do any lab work on that in quite a while.
Where are you taking that? I'm just sort of curious.
Nowhere at this point. I mean, at the time I did that, I was with a antenna research and development company down in Provo, Utah, that had some nice measuring equipment. Since leaving there, I haven't had a chance to follow up on it. I had been involved recently with a underwater communications project. Anything else? Lunch?
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Oliver.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's see here. I'm looking at the schedule here. We've actually got a few extra minutes before our next speaker is going to start. Let's see here. Let's see, we've got Frank Germano at 11 o'clock.